I'm Avriel O'Connor. I'm a user experience designer, and I teach user experience design at General Assembly. How many of you here know what user experience design is? Okay, good. That was a little nerve-wracking because I didn't know what the level we were coming in at. So I'm really excited to teach this because we found with our students that both the developer students and the user experience students get the most out of the time they get to collaborate. And that's what I'm going to talk about here, is just what user experience design is, how we collaborate with developers, and then go over some principles of UX design that you guys can use when creating apps. So really 5 principles that we use that you can use to create more usable websites. So to get started, what is user experience? So most people aren't aware of that. A lot of people know it has something to do with enhancing a user's experience, but that doesn't really say much. So I'm going to not define it because the definition is really vague in general, but kind of walk you guys through what it is in an overview. So this right here is what most people think UX design is. Raise your hand if this is what you thought UX design is, or right? It says it's visual design and interface design. That is what most people think UX design is, if they even know what it is in general. I mentioned on Facebook that I was doing a UX for developers workshop, and my mother-in-law was like, I don't know what that is. I was like, that's my career. So awesome. But it just shows that not a lot of people understand what it is. And when people think of UX design, they really think of design, visual design and interface design. But UX is so much more than that. So take a look at this list. Is there anything on here that surprises anybody? You can yell it out.
Writing.
Which one?
Writing.
Writing. Copywriting, any sort of technical writing, all of that, that generally is what people say. And if you think about it, copywriting or feature writing or spec writing, it makes a lot of sense because what you put on your website, a user has to understand. So I'll actually talk about that a little bit when we talk about the principles, but this is just to show that user experience design is so much more than just interface design, and most of the time it isn't even visual design. You do not need to be a visual designer to be a user experience designer. You do end up working on interfaces, but it's nothing to do with the color or anything that you think of. So UX really fits in the middle here, where we have to think of the user's needs as well as business goals, and then we have to take into account technical issues or technical capabilities. And that's where you guys come in. So working with developers is great because as a UX designer, we do have to think of all of this, but knowing our technical limits is where we can get that help from you. Because if we design something and then we haven't spoken to a developer and we take it to them and they're like, no, that's not even physically possible, our design is kind of useless. So it's really important to work together and understand that UX is more than just design. It's the whole experience, taking into account every aspect of a product. And that's basically what this means. So we're not just trying to make it usable or useful. We have to look at it as a whole. And user experience designers, we're helping people fall in love with the products that you guys are building. So that's a quick overview of what UX design is in general. There's obviously so much more, but for the sake of this, I'm going to just talk about that, and then I'm going to go into just some of that process and how we think through this, those business goals and everything, and then get into the design principles for you guys. So working with UX process and working with developers. So some of you, actually, let me see with the show of hands, who's here in high school? We have high school, college, okay. High school is fine, college, fine. So this right here, what I'm about to talk about, is a little more of like the work structure of it. So it might not make sense if you hadn't ever worked in it, but it should make sense in an overall conceptual idea of how the UX process can work within organizations. So when you talk about organizations, most people do this. This is the system perspective. It's how lots of work is done, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you can see here it's talking from the system, from what is built from the inside out. So first you build the product, then you think of those interactions, then you think of the user, and then you think of the experience. So again, nothing wrong with this perspective, but it's not the perspective we use as user experience designers. We use the experience perspective. So the difference here, as you can see, it's this outside in. So we take the experience first, and we always keep the user in mind. And if you think about it this way, we think experience, and then what those interactions are, and then we think about the touch points, and then we get to developing the system. So we're not building an app just for the sake of an app. We're testing to see if an app is even what needs to be made. Maybe it shouldn't be an app, maybe it should be a website. So if you were to just build an app right away and then test it, you might miss out on the fact that that's not even what users want. So we try to think of it from the experience to the system perspective. Another way to think of it is this analyze, design, test model. Again, nothing wrong with it. You're learning, you're building, you measure it, and you keep going. Totally fine. The only difference is it doesn't keep the user first. And again, everything in user experience design is constantly about the user. So we talk about this user-centered design approach. So if you see, it talks about observing and analyzing, design, evaluate, refine, and it's a constant circle. So we talk about UX as an iterative process, meaning it's just constantly evolving. At every stage in this process, we take the user into account and revise according to that. So again, nothing wrong with the standard way. I'm just trying to show you this is the user-centered approach, and that in the end, the big idea here is we're talking about getting the right solution. So a good example I like to use with this is there's an Albert Einstein quote, which maybe you've heard of. It's a little obscure, but it's something like, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend the first 55 minutes thinking about the problem, and then the next 5 minutes thinking about the solution. And basically what that's saying is the more you understand a problem, the better the solution will be. And that's really all UX is about. We're trying to get to that right solution first, and then get the solution right. So make sure we're even creating something for a problem that actually exists, and once we create that, we can refine it. And again, where you guys come in is it's not just about the users or the business goals. We also have to take into account what the technical limits are. So we like to say that UX is a team sport, and you guys are actually really critical to UX design. So this is a really great article. You guys will get, I think, these presentations, so you can check it out, but it's a great article that just talks about collaboration in UX design and how important it is for designers and developers to talk. Because unfortunately, there seems to be a stigma that, you know, we fight all the time, which isn't true. It's just more that we think differently. And I don't even think that's true. I think if you think about it, design isn't just about aesthetics, and developing isn't just about technical content. You guys have principles you use to develop well. We have principles we use to design well, and in fact, they're actually really similar. So if you guys keep in mind that when we come to you with our problems, we're not thinking that you built something wrong, we're thinking from the user's perspective. And if you understand the way our process works and we understand your process, we can collaborate to make a better product. So that's going to lead me into these principles of good design that I had mentioned. So what I'm going to do is go over these principles. I'm going to talk about them in a way that we do a research technique, which is called a heuristic analysis. Heuristic is a process. That's basically a fancy word for that. There's a bunch of heuristics for UX design, but I'm going to go through 5 of them, and I'm going to talk about how we use those to review a usability of a product, and that can be a website or an app, against these best principles. So for you guys, a really good way to remember this is to think of a lemur. So when you guys are building your apps or when you're doing our activity here later, this little cute animal should help keep it in mind. So the 5 things that we want to look for and think about when both designing and developing are learnability, efficiency, memorability, error management, and satisfaction. So these are 5 principles we look at when we test a product and test the experience, and this is something you guys can keep in mind when you're building it. And then we'll be able to collaborate better because you can understand what we're looking for. And if you don't have a designer, these 5 principles are a really good way just to keep the user in mind without having to think through, like, go do research and stuff. So I'm going to go through them one by one and then give you guys a task to actually test an experience and think like a user and if a website is following these 5 principles. So first, for learnability, how learnable is it? So the idea here is, what are you giving the user to help them understand the app, the system, the website, and what knowledge do they have to come in knowing? So if it's a tutorial, you probably are designing in a way that's for beginners, but if it's not, you're expecting people to know a certain level. So that's what we talk about with learnability. This is the idea of using conventions. So if you have a hamburger menu, don't put it in the middle of the screen. Like, that is not a convention that anybody would understand. However, if you do use a convention that people don't know, what are you doing to help the user learn it? So good examples here are things, like I said, conventions are a great example of it. Stick with conventions in general and you'll probably help your user. But if you find that people aren't understanding it, how can you help the user learn? So coaching is great. We've got so many different types. You got tours now, demos, you know, the transparency I see a lot now, which is, I think, really cool because you're not taking the user out and you're coaching them, which is something we like to talk about, where coach them, don't make them feel dumb, but give them what they need to continue. And then again, ideally we don't want to have to coach our users, but if you can't help it, if you use something that's a little different, make sure they know that. Efficiency. So this is where the copywriting or feature writing in general comes in. Is there any hesitation between the user and the system? So if you guys think about action buttons or calls to action, can the user quickly understand it, or is it confusing? Like, buy now. I think we all would know that. Add to cart. No hesitation there. But if you put something like, I really like this item, does that mean I'm liking it? Am I adding it to my cart? It's that type of thing. So you want to make sure what you're doing isn't going to cause any hesitation from the user. And also on that side, something I think I know I use, you guys probably use, are you making it efficient for the user that might already know the site? I think I'm getting weird feedback, but can you guys hear me? Okay. Sorry about that. Efficiency. So this is hotkeys, shortcuts. Are you giving the user that's already a power user something that makes it more efficient for them? Should I try it? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so learnability and then efficiency. You want the user to be able to understand what they're going to do, know what they're doing, and then be able to do it quickly, either by shortcuts or by giving them clear feedback and information. So that was learnability, efficiency, and then memorability. Now, memorability isn't, will they remember your site later? That's a different idea. That's satisfaction when we talk about it. This is more about the system in general. Is the system calling out changes since the user's last login? Okay. Anyways, it's about the UI elements and conventional positions like I spoke about. Is it something that the user doesn't have to think? We talk about the difference between needing to recall and then remembering. Users don't want to take a long time to have to sit and try to remember how to use something. It should be quick, and that's where, again, conventions, we talk a lot about conventions. If if they leave the site, would they be able to come back and use it very quickly? Or did you make stuff so confusing they need to do a tutorial every time? A good example of this is with Amazon. This example for Amazon, it may be a little different for different people, but Amazon does a great job of giving you reminders. So your preferred payment is about to expire, or your password has changed, or pointing out like, hey, since the last time you logged in, we've added this. That actually removes the need for memorability. So memorability can be on both sides, and I talk about it in a second with error management as well. Like, can you design for memorability, or can you do something that takes away the need to even remember, like giving them a call out? So, hey, you changed your password, or you need to fill this out before you continue, or you're not going to be able to purchase. So memorability is really important, and it's also goes along with error management, which I'm about to go over, where is error management, can you make it so there aren't errors? So when I like to design, or when I design, I have to do a success state and then an error state. And it's kind of a pain to always have to do that, but it's really important, because if you think about error handling, how do you know that there was an error? Sometimes there's the red box, or they point it out for you. So you generally have to design that, or else people will get confused. So it's all about how are you handling those errors. But on my end, I actually prefer to anticipate the errors first. So is there a way I can design this so we don't even get to an error state? Which would be great, but again, sometimes it's not possible. So you need to design so that you're forgiving them. If they make an error, are they able to back out without losing all their information? Or I think we've all filled out a form, get to the end, something was wrong and the entire form deleted. Nobody likes that. So are you forgiving them? Are your error messages clear? So really good example, something like this, where they tell you before you even move on that the username's not available. The password hints are great. I know for me, when I go to a site and I don't know which of my passwords I use, I like when the hints are there, because then I can be like, oh, okay, I used the one where I don't have a number in it, or something like that. And sometimes you get really good at playing around these. Like if they don't tell me the hint and I can't remember it, I just put in a random set of letters so I can see the error message. Again, that's anticipating the error. Instead of having the user go to an error state, anticipate they might forget their password. So give them that option. And then the final one is satisfaction. So this one is delight. This is where the idea of delight comes in, and that's what I was talking about when I said memorability is not about are they remembering your website. That one's more about can they remember what's on the website. Satisfaction, this is what are you doing so that when the user leaves, they feel good. So I think we've all like opened up an app and we're like, wow, this is a great app. That feeling of I'm satisfied. This is different than other ones I've used. The execution was good. So it's something you guys especially can really handle with, are you making it technically, easy for them to get through it? The best example here in San Francisco is Uber. They didn't do anything crazy. Their app isn't this, super sophisticated, difficult app. But what they did was they brought a feeling of luxury and convenience to people, so that they left feeling satisfied. And that's kind of what satisfaction is about. So learnability, efficiency, memorability, error management, and satisfaction are really what you can think of when you're developing to make a really good user experience. It's not that many, and you remember the lemurs, so you'll be able to do that. And what I'm gonna do now is give you guys a chance to actually practice that. So if you look at the Google form that was sent out, I give you the links to this. So I'll go through it with you, and then I can walk around and help as we go through it. So the point of this exercise is go to either the Australian public transit or the BART. Now, if you're familiar with the San Francisco area, my suggestion is check out the Australian one. If you're not really familiar, this is kind of, the point of this is to really have you think as a user that never has been in a city before. But if you want to look at it just through a BART perspective because you use it, definitely check out the San Francisco one. So on the Google form, there's already these tasks, but I'll leave this up. And I have you guys find out when a train leaves from one location and goes to another location and how much it costs. And while you do that task, think about those 5 principles, and as a user, what is this site doing or not doing that's following these principles? So when you got there, is it obvious how to find the train schedule? Is the errors handled properly? If they're not, how could they make them better? So it's nothing outrageous, but it is a good way for you to analyze an experience from a user's perspective. Does that make sense? Everybody good? Show of hands if you have questions. If you have questions. Okay. So if you still haven't got the Google form open, I can come around and help you, and I'll leave this up, and we'll do it for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a little wrap up at like 10:45. All right.
You're just gonna walk around and
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll remind them to fill. And I forgot to say, so on the Google form, the learnability, efficiency, the 5 principles I've put in there so that you can type in directly. So if you either split your screen or want to work with somebody else to look at their screen and then fill out on your screen, that way it's online and you don't have to write it down or anything. And then you can submit that.
Does everybody have the Google form?
I think so. You never got the email? So do you go to the HackingEDU site and you can get to it?
Invite you. What's your
Oh, that works too. Oh, no worries.
We're taking trains.
So how did I go access my Google form? I'm trying to
Okay, so go to the HackingEDU site. And then, yeah, scroll all the way down until you get to the schedule. There you go. And then open the UX for developers and right-click on that. And it'll take you to the Facebook page. And then there's a link in there. It says somewhere down here the form can be, right, somewhere there? Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. There you go.
So I guess in that, I would say not these new contacts. Otherwise, I can't.
Seems they all are doing something. Everything okay?
Yeah, the Wi-Fi disconnected.
Oh no, yeah, that's a good point. We're probably killing it.
No, but like, I mean, I never wear glasses. Google does. Or not the doc, sorry.
Travel time.
Facebook. The Facebook thing that I told you about.
I knew that.
If anybody's still having problem finding the Google form, the easiest way is to go to the HackingEDU website, scroll to the schedule, and then on the UX for developers, right-click, and it'll take you to the Facebook page. So maybe this isn't the easiest, but we figured it out. And then you can get the Google form link from there. Yeah.
Like how should I make a mistake on this one?
I guess you can just see, one way of doing it is go to the wrong place and see if, like, is it easy to get back where you're supposed to be. So if you clicked the wrong one, could also be an error. So if you clicked like a wrong link, we could consider that an error. And then, you know, if they change the entire heading then, or the navigation, then that's pretty bad. But generally, most sites should not do that. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't a lot of changes. Some people are having trouble joining Slack because we have too many outstanding invitations. So
Oh no. I didn't even know that was a problem, or could be a problem. Do you want that announced if anybody's still having problems? Or I told them how to get there from the Facebook.
Everybody looks like they're doing something.
I'll give them about 7 more minutes, and then we can wrap up or do a closing at like 10:40.
Cool.
Because it starts, the next one's at 11, right? So they have 10 minutes in between?
Yeah.
Okay.
10:50 is when we should wrap up.
Yeah. No, I think we're good. I'm just going to have them do 5 more minutes and then do a little closing and Q&A if they need. So.
Awesome. This looks like a great workshop.
Oh, good. I'm glad it worked out. Should I smile? Oh, thank you. Okay, we'll do about 5 more minutes, and then we can do a little discussion if you guys have anything you want to chat about, but I'll do a little closing recap of what we talked about, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this. So about 5 more minutes and we'll get back together.
That's it?
Thank you for the switching.
Sure.
I don't know what happened. Ah.
Ran out of power.
Oh. Okay, if you guys want to finish wrapping up, and we can do a little discussion about it if you guys are interested. So how does anybody need a little bit more time? Yeah? Okay. A couple more minutes.
I just started using
Well, I tried all my
they would have been so I'm good to go.
She doesn't even have as many emails as that.
But no JS we're looking for
Just about to bring them all back. Okay, it's okay if you're not done, but does anybody want to share anything? Learnability issues, anything you noticed on either site that was terrible or really good? In the purple.
Yeah, Bart's really bad.
Bart is bad. Yes, it is. That's actually why we use this one all the time. Somebody once asked me, they're like, does your husband work at Bart? Like, why do you always use it? And I was like, no, it's just a bad site. It's a really good example. No offense if anybody in here knows somebody that works there. Why was it bad?
Well, start off with they had, instead of having just like a single search field, they basically had to choose either from a drop-down menu or you had to type in an address. And they didn't make it clear that you could type in an address or a landmark, and then it would disambiguate and like figure out what the address was. When you're on the menu to find out like your, after you get the query returned, it would tell tell you like, hey, like here's the trays from Bart for like your first leg of the chip,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to click somewhere else for the second leg of the chip.
Okay.
Like it's on 2 different pages. I mean, there's a lot more than that.
Yeah, so for people that didn't hear, so it's there was a learnability issue. It sounds like you don't know where you can, like it has a drop down and a search box, and you can do landmarks or an address, it sounds like. So learnability efficiency would go with that one. It's not very quick to figure out your how to get from one place to another. Did you have something?
Oh, for like efficiency, it
Mhm.
doesn't accept SFO as a proper like search term for
Really?
San Francisco Airport. You have to type in San Francisco International.
Okay, I don't know if you guys heard that. It doesn't actually have SFO as an option. Like you have to type in San Francisco, which doesn't make sense because you think it would. The smarter thing would be maybe connect to Google, so you don't have to build your own whole situation. So something to think about. One thing we say a lot with UX too is utilize technology that's out there. I'm sure if you guys are developers, you probably already know to Google your question, you copy and paste, and we do the same thing. Especially like, don't reinvent the wheel if the wheel doesn't need to be reinvented. Some of those conventions that are out there are there for a reason. So if you can utilize something that's already good and exists, but some people want to build a better map, I guess. Anybody else? We can, one more? Yeah.
Well, I just didn't see the cost anywhere right there. You could find out the departure time and arrival time, but there was no clear way that I saw to see the cost. So I don't know. That's under efficiency to me.
I was actually going to mention that the cost is there, but it's just in tiny text right underneath.
Yeah.
And it's just, you would never read it.
So memorable maybe, because you have to think about that. If you were to come back and be like, oh, I remember I found it, but where did I find it? And I do that all the time. I think the other day I was in Illustrator and I wanted to save something in a PDF, and I completely forgot because export in Illustrator does not allow for export to PDF, where other programs do. So it's kind of one of those things like, you know, iOS versus Android, certain things that you can remember in one don't always go to the other. But you can keep working on that if you haven't. I'm just going to do a little bit of a wrap up, and if you have any questions, we can do some Q&A. So basically, I wanted to just kind of give you guys an overview of UX, explain how we can work together, user experience designers and developers, and let you guys really understand what's at the heart of it, like why we do what we do and how we can help you. So really, over and over, we always take it back to the user. At the end of the day, you know, even within our own groups, we'll have disagreements on what should be done with the product, and it has to go back to the user. And if we don't know, we have to go test, because your product isn't going to be, if it's not useful or usable or even desirable, you're not making a product that anybody would use, right? And just a little bit of a recap, what we talked about here. So user-centered design is, again, at the heart of it. It's very research-driven. It's not, you know, lab research-driven. It is going out and just watching people and testing, like, on the spot, looking at people use apps. So it's research-driven in that we are always making sure everything that we're creating matches what a user would actually do or want. Collaborative, balancing both the user's goals, the business needs, and then knowing the technical limitations. So we all need to work together to make sure, again, we're thinking of that user and giving them the best possible product. Iterative, I talked about that user-centered design process. We're observing, analyzing, refining, and then we do it over and over. So you guys might have the same thing. You build it, you go back a few weeks later, and then you start changing it. It's the same with us. We're never done because we're constantly reviewing it and changing. And then the conventional wisdom about good design. If you guys don't do or take anything away from this, or don't do any additional reading on good design or good conventions, just remember those 5. Those are really good ones for you to think of when you're developing. If your website or your app is learnable, are you making it efficient, memorable? I think at the heart of it, that's really what it's about, is you guys can take some of our conventions and we can take some of your conventions and make a better product. So let's see. If you want to, if you can see that, that's my email address and Twitter, and you guys can contact me or talk to me today if you, during your coding, if you, the code time, if you raise your hand, I can come and check out some of your usability issues and see if I can help, and I'll be around. So with that, we have about a couple minutes if anybody has any questions. You and then you.
Could you, just really quickly, kind of maybe education or work experience that if somebody wants to become a UX designer and they haven't yet, like specific classes or?
Yeah, so I'm at General Assembly right now, and we do a full immersive course, which is full-time, 9 to 5, 10 weeks. That's one really deep way of doing it. There's also part-time courses at General Assembly. There's online courses. There's some great books to read just to like really, if you don't want to be a UX designer but you want to have those skills. Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think is a really good one. I think it's like whatever 100 things every designer needs to know about psychology is really good, because that's also I was talking with some of the other mentors this morning about front end versus UX design. And that type of book would be really helpful, so you know why to make a button blue versus red, and where to put it on the page. So there's that, and then there are more classes like human computer interaction at like a college level. I don't know if there's any outside of that, but definitely take a look, and we can chat outside about any other resources. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so as developers, I think, and you've talked a lot about conventions for this, as developers I think we always strive to make new conventions, and I'm wondering, how do you balance old conventions and new conventions to kind of maximize user usability and not overload them with new conventions versus not dumb them down and be able to create something new? Yeah,
it's a hard thing to do, because at some point, like especially with us, we're like, don't change things, and that's probably where the whole idea that we are constantly butting heads. But the way I like to think of it is start with the convention and then make small tweaks. And as long as we or you are constantly testing those as you go along, it could evolve into something bigger. But we wouldn't go straight from like a hamburger menu to a dial without anybody knowing what that meant. So I think if you slowly take it, and you can see how that happens with design in general, like things went from menu to something that looked like a hamburger menu that said see more, and now we know what the menu means on its own. So it's kind of taking things slowly and making sure users are catching on.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
More between learnability and memorability?
Learnability versus memorability? Yeah, so learnability is the idea, let's see, I can go back up for a second and actually put it here. So learnability, it's that idea of knowledge. If you think of learnability like knowledge, so what knowledge does the user already have that you're taking advantage of? And if they don't have that knowledge and they come to your site, what are you doing to help them learn? So that's like tip text and pop-ups or tutorials and guides. And like I said, you're assuming somebody that's coming to your site knows a certain level. If they don't know that level, what are you giving to them for to learn? And then memorability. Oops. This is this one I could always find a little odd. So this one I actually think of do something to negate it. So I gave the example here of Amazon giving you call outs. They're negating the need to remember anything. So it's when they come to your site, are they going to be able to quickly use it again? We talked about with BART, we couldn't find where the price was. Somebody found it, but would you remember that when you went back on, or would you have that moment of like, I know, I saw this somewhere. That's the type of thing. So recollection and what do they have to remember to use your site? So they're very similar. But the slight difference is just kind of the knowledge versus what they have to recall. So that's it. It's 10:50. So I want to give you guys your 10-minute break before the next one. But I'll be around. And if you have any questions, just come up to me or email or Twitter. And hopefully you have a good rest of your day.